Hi guys and welcome back to Car Focused. I'm doing a video today in my garage. I did plan on doing this video outside, but it's raining. Traditional British summer, I guess. So I didn't fancy doing a video out in the wet. So we're in the garage today, so I don't have as much room as what I'd ideally like, but we're gonna see if I can get the video done anyway. So we'll just make do with the space we've got. Anyway, cut to the chase. This video is gonna be a buyer's guide for my, for a Mark II Focus RS. I've had this Mark II Focus RS nearly 4 years now, and over those 4 years I've encountered various little issues and niggles which I've kind of cobbled together in a list, and I thought I'd share them with you guys. So if there's anybody out there looking to buy a Mark II Focus RS, hopefully this list will help them in their quest to finding a good one. So we'll go around the car, we'll touch upon the engine, cosmetic stuff, common faults and that kind of thing. And then hopefully, yeah, that'll be it. And hopefully somebody will find it interesting. So I've got a list on my phone, which I'm going to go through, and I'm going to tick them off as we go through. I don't want to miss anything. And if anything else comes into my head, I'll just throw it into the video as well. So without further ado, let's get it started. So I'm hoping you can see me here. It's a bit dark in here, but we'll start at the front of the car and we'll start at the engine. So I'm going to go through my little list. So a car of this age is going to encounter wear and tear issues. So one of the common things which can go, which is quite expensive, is the alternator. So when the engine's running, just make sure there's no sort of whining noises from the alternator. It sounds normal. You can always hook a voltmeter up to it just to make sure it's getting the correct charge into the battery. So yeah, that's one of the things that can go, and they're quite expensive, but you can replace them on an exchange basis. And the alternator runs off one of the auxiliary belts, which is down there. Make sure the cam belt and the auxiliary belts have been done. The interval is 10 years or 100,000 miles, I think. So all of these cars now should have had that done. If they haven't, then that's obviously a warning sign, and it's something that you're going to want to get done straight away. Or it could even show that it hasn't been looked after maybe as well, because that is something that most owners have changed now. You can visually look at the auxiliary belts. If there's any cracks or they look a bit tired, then you know that they haven't been done. Another common fault on these, and it's a fault I had on mine when I first got it, is the radiators. They are prone to leaking after 10 or so years, or maybe even sooner than that. Now, a way you can check to see if the radiator is leaking, obviously you will notice there might be a bit of a puddle of coolant on the floor, but a lot of it actually gets soaked up into the under tray. So a way of actually checking that is you can put your hand right down the bottom of the radiator, and there is a foam lining at the bottom. Fill that foam. If there's any coolant in there, then you know you've potentially got a radiator leak. And I managed to get a radiator off eBay for a fairly good price, actually, a genuine Ford radiator from a Ford store, and then it was replaced under warranty from the warranty I had when I bought the car. Another quite common fault I've had this go on my ST is the reverse switch as well, which is on top of the gearbox. It's quite a fiddly job to replace, but basically you just want to make sure that your rear parking sensors are working and your reverse light is working. If they're not working, the chances are your reverse switch is gone. Now, the engines on these are generally, they're pretty solid, they're pretty bulletproof. It's the trusty old Volvo 5-cylinder 2.5 turbo engine. It's pretty good. So I'm led to believe anything under 400 horsepower, they're pretty solid, don't really require much work doing. So if it's one that's been left standard or lightly tuned, there shouldn't really be too many horror stories with these engines. But obviously on startup, just make sure it's running nice and smooth. These are a very smooth engine. There shouldn't really be any excessive tapping or knocking or anything like that. Obviously you don't want any smoke coming from the exhaust. A bit of condensation's fine if it's been sat for a while, but you don't want any blue smoke or anything like that. Should run nice and clean. Make sure it's boosting nicely as well. I don't even know what these boost to as standard, but I think you're going to want to see it boosting sort of 1/2 to 3/4 on the gauge when you're accelerating. I did test drive one of these before I bought this, and it just wasn't boosting properly at all. Common fault for these is the boost solenoid, which can go on these, which is quite an easy fix itself as well. If you want to look into more of that, just Google Mark II Focus RS or ST boost solenoid. It's a well-known common issue as well. We covered the cam belt. Another thing we're at the front of the car here is the bonnet lock. Now, Ford fitted this generation of Focus with a fiddly bonnet lock. You have to flip open the badge, put a key in, turn it left, then turn it right, and you hear a click, and then you can release the bonnet. These are prone to failing. You can replace the whole system yourself and have a different key, or there is a mod where you can get, I think it's a Mondeo system, where you have the traditional handle, and I think you can retrofit it in the glove box. A lot of people do that. Mine hasn't failed yet, but it's probably is something which is going to go at some point in the near future, but I hope it doesn't. Also, these headlight washer covers, now these are prone to sort of flying off mid-journey, and they do become loose. Mine is a little bit loose. There's a fix for that as well, which you can do. It's something I'm probably going to do at some stage. I think it's like a cable tie fix where you can basically secure it to the main arm inside so it doesn't fly off. But yeah, keep an eye out for those, because if they are loose, the likelihood is that's something that you're going to have to change at some point in the near future, or fix yourself in the near future. Headlights. Now, these are xenon headlights. When I had my Mark II Focus ST, I did this fix myself, but the projectors are known for burning out. So the reflectors on the back of the projectors, which reflect the light out, over time, the heat from the xenons, it burns them out and crisps them up. So basically there's no reflecting properties left. So the headlights become quite ineffective. Now, if you get to look at one of these when it's dark or get it in a dark place, just try the lights out, because if they're not that great, the chances are you're going to need to replace the projectors, and it is a DIY job. I have done it. There is a video on it that I've done. You've got to be quite brave, because you do have to cut the back of the lights out and stuff, but it's well worth doing if your headlights are rubbish. Also, the side lights on these cars, some of them, they scorch the inside of the headlight. Now, mine have done it a tiny bit, but some can be quite bad. I've seen some cars with really bad sort of scorch marks here. These headlights now, they are not cheap. I think they're about £400. Is it £400 each or for a pair? I can't remember, but they're not cheap. So if you do see a car that has massive scorch marks and it's going to play with your OCD, factor in replacement headlights, which, like I say, is going to cost, it's at least 400, 450 quid. So you need to really factor that into your budget. I've noticed some of these cars, they basically have a custom front under tray. Because the RS is much wider and it has a different front bumper which comes out further, there's the standard under tray, and then there's a front under tray which is bespoke to the RS. Now, if you look at pictures, through the front grille here, sometimes you'll see daylight through the front grille, and if you see daylight on the pictures on the ad, you know that it hasn't got that front under tray, that it's blown off, it's disintegrated. This is also another very rare and expensive part, so you're going to need to factor that into your budget if it doesn't have one. I think you can buy aftermarket ones, but still, it's something that is going to cost you a few quid. So make sure that you've got both under trays fitted on the car when you have a look at it. Now, these are at the age where they're kind of suffering with corrosion. Now, corrosion is a bit of a problem. It's something you need to be aware of on these cars. And an area which can be compromised on these, which is quite weak, is the jacking points on the pinch welds. So on the sill, there's jacking points, front and rear. Now, over the years, people get the trolley jacks on them. They're not very careful. They don't use the pucks and stuff like that. And it basically bends them out of shape. And they're just in there. And mine have been a bit twisted as well. And if they're bent and out of shape, obviously takes any protective paint coating off of it, and it can compromise that sill. So have a look underneath, make sure those pinch welds are secure and there's no rust forming around them, because if there is, again, it's something you're going to have to factor in to be treated in the near future. Now, also here, this cover here on the side skirt, underneath that is also another point where the front arches can rust out. You can actually check that by opening the door up. There's a little gap. You can look inside and you can get your eyes on the sort of inside of there, maybe with a torch, and you can see if there's any rust forming, and it means you don't have to take that off. Obviously have a look underneath as well to see if you can see any rust. But these arches, obviously another bespoke item to the RS, very expensive, and if you've got rust forming there, that's something that's going to need to be treated in the near future. Also, in terms of corrosion, you're going to want to be looking underneath now, the front and rear subframes, that kind of thing. Just have a good visual check just to make sure, you know, there's nothing serious under there. You've got to expect a bit of surface rust on these cars. Surface rust can be rubbed down, treated. You know, it's not that detrimental, but if there's anything a bit more serious, then you need to consider what you're going to do with that moving forward. Now, the rear arches on these as well. So this is a very common issue, the rear arches. These were going kind of a couple of years after they were new. So these are a double skinned arch. Just run your finger along there, see if it feels nice and smooth. Have a nice visual check as well. Get it in different bits of light and you'll be able to see if there's any bubbling up, forming underneath the arches. Seems to be more common on the white cars, I don't know why. I do have a little bit underneath the paint on mine, which will need sorting at some point, but it's nothing that's really scaring me at the minute. It lives in this garage, so it's fine. And also where the rear arch meets the rear bumper, that is a bit of a pinch point, a bit of a friction point, and that can actually cause the arches to rust out on that specific area as well. So have a good look in there and just check to see if there's any rust forming in there or not. So we're going to move around to the rear of the car now. Ideally, I'd like to have the camera outside, but it's so miserable out there, it's raining. So there's a couple of things to check on the rear of the car. The first one being the spoiler. I've mentioned a video on this before. These spoilers over time, basically they start to develop a rattle. Now mine's fine because I've fixed it myself. They're sealed underneath with a foam strip. Now over time that foam strip just thins out, it wears away, and it essentially means that the spoiler is just rattling on the glass of the boot lid, and that will cause quite an annoying rattle, and it will need resealing. Fairly straightforward job. You just have to remove the spoiler, add some new sealant, and reseal up the bolt holes as well, because that is a place where it can leak water. So yeah, when you do look at the car, when you close the boot, there will be a wobble from the spoiler. That's totally normal, but you just want to give it a little knock with your hands and make sure it's not rattling, because it should feel nice and firm. You can also visually look between the crack between the glass and the spoiler, and sometimes when the foam starts to disintegrate, it will drop down and you'll see it kind of poking out. If it looks nice and solid in there, then you know there are no problems with the car in terms of its spoiler and the way it's been sealed. So yeah, that is another common issue. Also the rear lights. Now if we open up the boot, you can take these rear lights off. It's fairly easy, just 3 screws and a couple of push clips that will just pull out. These get really dirty underneath, so it's always worth having a look under here to making sure there's no rust or anything like that. I've cleaned mine out underneath. But at the bottom of the lights, the plastic does tend to rub on the paint, and that will rub the paint away, and it can cause rust again. There's a few design flaws with this car. I took my lights off, I kind of sanded it, rubbed it down at the point where it was touching the paint, and I put a bit of touch-up paint over where it rubbed the paint off, and hopefully that'll be fine in the future. It wasn't too bad. So yeah, have a look at the lights by all means. I know it's kind of awkward when you're looking at a car, but if it means you have to take these 3 screws out, pop it out and have a look, then do so. You're not going to cause any damage, so don't be afraid. And another thing which also occurs as a common issue is these trims here, these kind of seals on the edge of the windscreen. These are literally just pushed on. There's an adhesive strip on them which will stick to the glass. Now these also sag down, and they sag down to such an extent where they start rubbing on the paint on the tip of the tailgate there on both sides. It happened to mine on both sides. I got away with it though. Just got a slight mark on the paint there, but it hasn't actually gone through it and it hasn't caused rust. I've known some people to have quite a bit of rust in there where that's been rubbing away over the years. So yeah, I literally ripped the old ones off, got a pair of new ones, stuck it back on in the correct position, and jobs are good. Also, if you've got a Lux 2 car with a camera, the cameras are prone to cracking. When they've been left out in the cold over the years, they'll expand and contract, and they will gradually crack. They're not great cameras anyway, but if you do see one that's got a crack on it, a new camera is about 350 quid, I think. They do still sell them on eBay, I believe, but they're quite rare now. Don't be too concerned about it, but that is another thing you want to have a look at and just make sure is in order. Underneath the car at the back, as I mentioned, subframes and corrosion. Check the drop links. They're rare now as well to get hold of. If it's play on the drop links, you'll just hear a knocking from the rear on your test drive. Very easy to replace, but like I say, they're quite rare now and probably gone up in price. I changed mine, I paid about 90 quid for the pair, for an aftermarket pair. But yeah, just have a little look at that and check your bushes and stuff as well underneath, because it's at the age now where they're going to start perishing and need replacing. But yeah, the back of the car, that's pretty much it. If you've got a car that's got a standard exhaust and the owner's claiming it's a standard car, just get underneath, because to take the standard exhaust off, you will have to cut it. So if you look underneath and that exhaust has been sleeved, you know that in the previous years or whatever, it's had an aftermarket exhaust on it, and you're being told porkies. So just where the exhaust comes over the rear beam, just make sure there's no sleeve there, or make sure it hasn't been cut. If it's one solid exhaust, then the chances are that's been on the car since it was new. So yeah. So moving to the inside of the car now. These cars are like 13, 14 years old. They're going to show signs of wear. But it's a good indication looking inside the car as to whether the car's been looked after or not. I think anyway. I think someone that looks after their car is going to keep the inside of the car nice and tidy, keep it nice and clean. And it just kind of gives me good vibes if I go and see a car that's well kind of looked after in that respect. Anyway, so obviously your wear points in the car now, they're at the stage where they're going to be showing signs of a little bit of wear and tear. Don't be too scared, don't be too put off. The bolster is a really common area. It will develop a little shine over time, and it sometimes can wear down through to the bar. If you've got one that's got a hole in it, obviously you're going to need to get that section of the seat reupholstered. If you haven't got a hole in it, like I haven't, you can buy new foam padding to go inside there. I think you can do that yourself. But yeah, just a thing to look out for. You probably want to factor in the cost of having that reupholstered if it's gone through to the bar. Steering wheel, they're going to show signs of wear now. Mine's pretty good. They do get shiny over the years. You can get products and stuff to give them a nice sort of matte kind of look again. But yeah, the steering wheels are at the age where they're going to show signs of wear. Some of them, if they've gone through the leather, you're probably going to need to get that reupholstered or a new steering wheel. So again, something else to factor into the cost. And yeah, just check for the usual cigarette burns and stuff like that. But mine's pretty good. And it's just a good indication of mileage as well. If someone is saying it's a certain mileage and it's got all sorts of rips and tears in it, it might be something a bit suspicious going on there. Check the air conditioning works nicely. So if you're looking at it in the summer, get it on low, make sure it's a nice, really cold air coming out the vents there. It could need regassing or reconditioning or something like that if it's not working. And yeah, that's pretty much it really inside the car. It's just the usuals to look out for. There are no common faults as such. They are quite rattly now. You will hear some rattles on test drives. They're quite a stiff car, so don't be surprised if there are rattles and stuff. But yeah, on the whole, they are quite a solid interior, this generation of Focus. And just check everything works basically. But that's it for the inside of the car. So there you go, guys. I think I've covered most of the things I could think of in terms of common faults. This isn't a guide to tell you everything to look out for when buying a car like this. It's just things that crop up on these particular cars themselves. Obviously, I'm sure you'll do all your thorough history checks and stuff and your bodywork checks to make sure it hasn't been involved in any accidents or anything like that. In relation to people selling standard cars, like I say, there are a couple of things to check if you want to make sure they are a genuine standard car. Just check all your panel gaps and stuff, because if the bumper's been off at any point for an intercooler, they don't tend to go back on as tight as they once did. So if you've got a bit of a panel gap there where the front wing meets the bumper, probably shows that the bumper's been off at some stage. So just look out for that kind of stuff really. But on the whole, they're a good car, solid car. This has been very reliable in the 4 years that I've owned it. Granted, I've only done 3,000–4,000 miles a year, but other than the radiator, I've not really had any issues. I had a battery go, but they're just consumables really, just wear and tear items. They are a solid car, and if you look after them, they will look after you. Bit thirsty on fuel, as we all know, but I guarantee it'll put a smile on your face. The sound, the feel of the power, just the engine, the looks, just everything about this car. They're great cars, and I highly recommend, if you are looking to buy one, that you do buy one. I wouldn't personally daily drive it. I wouldn't daily drive it now. It's just a bit too old, a bit too precious. It doesn't have the mod cons that you can get in something newer. But maybe if you can only like literally have a Mark II and that's it, you can't have another car and you want to daily it, it will do the job fine, but it might just take the shine off ownership a little bit. So for me, it's just a special weekend car. Yeah, any other questions, guys, about the car, feel free to drop them in the comments box below. If there are any things that I've missed, which I'm sure there are, that are also common faults, then please put them in the comments box below for people to look at, and hopefully it will help out somebody that's looking to buy one of these cars. But that's it. That's it. That is my buyer's guide of the Mark II Focus RS. Sorry I couldn't get out on the road in it. Would have loved to, but it's chucking it down with rain. But it's all just usual stuff really in relation to the drive, just clutch slip, that kind of thing. Just your general checks, which you do in any car really. But yeah, anyway, I'm going to stop waffling on. I hope you've enjoyed the video. As always, guys, take care. Please like and subscribe if you haven't done so already, and I shall see you soon.